Actually, I'm thrilled to be able to share this. The version of this presentation I gave at B-Side San Antonio this year was squeezed into about a 23-minute window. It feels a little more comfortable to me to give at this pace. So we're going to shoot for around 45, 50 minutes. So I hope you have your beverage of choice with you and your headphones on. I'll try not to completely radio announcer you to death. But let's start with talking about what this is about. This is about fighting imposter syndrome. It's this weird monster that sits on your shoulder and whispers in your ear and tells you you're not good enough, that you don't know enough, that you don't have what it takes. And so whatever that version of it looks like to you, it's our self-doubt. And that's going to be a recurring theme throughout this presentation. So if you've never heard of it before, you're going to hear a lot about it today because, again, in days gone by, it had another name. But for me, when I was growing up, I don't know what it was like for you, but in our house, my brother had the stereo, which meant I always had to listen to whatever it was he wanted to hear. So I got shoved into my ear holes. I got a lot of 80s music, right? And part of that was a band, Yes, which I grew to despise. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm so burned out. If it came on the radio, you turn off the radio or you ask someone to change the station, because I was really young at this point. But the point is that I heard it so many times that this Owner of a Lonely Heart and other songs off this album, because it had multiple hits, which means you never get away from it. It's everywhere on the radio. But 90125 is the name of the album. And I wanted something that was more my own, but I didn't have a stereo. So okay, I have to figure out a way to do it. And so one summer I scraped together my allowance and did what I needed to do so that I could save up and get my own stereo. And I learned about a band that could not be further from the sound in my mind than The Art of Noise, right? The Art of Noise is this band that takes literally the sounds of broken dishes and cars starting, and they put that together to go ahead and make an album, make music. And it's actually amazing to me to see that come together as a musical thing. And I think I have my own sound and it's different and it's not 90125. Well, then flash forward a few years. I don't know. So the internet wasn't around when I first was listening to music. Well, now it is, let's say, many, many years later. And on one of those websites where they have the where are they now and where do they come from, it turns out that The Art of Noise only exists because a guy helping them with recording drum samples went on to use those samples to make a song called Beatbox. He was a music programmer, and his name is J.J. Jesselsick. And he and a couple of folks got together with the producer, Trevor Horn, who made 90125, by the way. That was the producer. The point being that 90125 is the reason The Art of Noise came into being at all, because that was the catalyst for this music programmer to be in a position to have the work to develop their own sound and their own ideas. So all these years later, I have to look back and actually appreciate 90125, the band, Yes, and Owner of a Lonely Heart, because that's the same technology. And I share this with you because what this means is sometimes something you think you know, some piece of information you have or you've gone over before may hold an entire completely different set of information for you in the future. You can revisit things that you thought you knew and learn something entirely new. And that is something that is kind of like a career. That's what we're really talking about. This is a career you start with. I started stocking shelves. Okay, terrific. So that's a job. But if you come to learn how that's important later and how it can feed efficiency, maybe it changes your perspective on what the work means and what it can do for you. In the same way, you always have to grow and learn from your mistakes, right? There's always another opportunity to either look back and say, man, I could have done that differently, but I didn't understand it that way at the time. Or you can turn around and help someone else with a helping hand and help them to understand as you move forward in a career. So this brings us to the idea of we're really trying to add value. So we can argue back and forth about what the systems or the isms are behind all of our jobs or corporate environments or whatever career path we choose, but it comes down to what you bring to the table, right? You're always going to be trying to, or you should, in my opinion, always be trying to better yourself right? What can you bring to add to your team, which is a reason that your teammates appreciate you, maybe one of the reasons, not just because that fantastic smile and shining, sparkling sense of humor, who knows, but also your management is going to appreciate you for what you bring, and the wider community can benefit as well. Just like today, I have the pleasure and opportunity to share this with you. This is part of my story, but really this is supposed to be about a lot of different ways that you can give back and share, because you can grow in many ways. Sometimes it's through maturity, as depicted here, because maturity sometimes takes the form of a 40-year-old, a middle-aged human riding around on a scooter with a flag. It can also take away other ideas, like going to broaden your mind or sense of perspective by attending events like conferences. And even in this time of chosen isolation or required separation and social distancing, this is still a fantastic way to meet other people, interact, and get a perspective that's outside of the box we exist in. We live in a bubble, right? We exist in a space, and that space is shaped like San Antonio in this case. But what if it wasn't? What if you could go and look on YouTube and see someone else talking about a different topic? Sure, it's all sitting right there, but you didn't have an excuse to go and look at it. It's just all there, and it's just this giant wall of information. We're going to talk today about the biggest of stories. We're going to talk about your story. And that's what we're going to do in the form, or using the format of story arcs. And so just to make sure I mention it, a story arc is, hey, if there is kind of the beginning when the hero doesn't know in this storybook that they are the hero and they have to come to terms with it. That's one arc. But then there's a second part to it where they grow enough to realize they want to fall in love, or they want to grow expand their understanding of the world. And each of these things represents a story arc. And so in your story, only you know what part of the story you are currently in, whether it's the, hey, I'm drinking from the fire hose, or am I going to be at my point where I'm giving back or trying to organize events for other people. And sometimes these arcs even overlap. The point to keep in mind is that you're the only one who knows where you are, and not all story arcs are broken into nice, neatly wrapped up in a bow timelines. These things can take time to build on. So there are some disclaimers that are important to mention. Number one, I don't know if you ever saw Chuck. I love the first season of that show for sure. And it's, you have to be willing to leave the comfort of the herd. The only way this is going to work is if you can bust out of your shell and move forward, move beyond the fact that you don't like other people. I've discovered that people who don't like other people even need at least one other person to tell that to. And that becomes super important as we grow and as we try to mature ourselves and build towards something special. What is it you really want out of life, out of your career, out of your progression? You can sit at home all day long and go through every bag of chips you want and only watch the things that help you get to a certain level, or you can push further. Disclaimer two, you will find people who are just not there to help you. People who have decided for whatever reason they don't like something about you, what you stand for, what they think you have, what they think you represent. And those folks will stand in your way. They will tell you that you either don't have the skills, the experience, or the permission to be doing the things that you're doing. And you have to be willing to either ignore them, push past them, or accept them so that you can move on. Because if we get tied up in someone else's story, it's very hard to focus on our own growth. It can wear you down, it can beat you down. I'm not gonna lie. There are things that will put you in a bad place. So just keep this in mind as we go forward through our talks today. So talking about an agenda and where we're going to be, there are two different ways I've chosen to explain it. I like to think of it in terms of a Dungeons and Dragons style or role-playing game is the first way this occurred to me, but someone else explained that there might be another way to look at this, which is you start out at the very bottom, work your way to the top, or you start drinking from the fire hose, you work towards specialization, you suddenly become the go-to human in your space, and then you're going to turn around and try to share that with other people, and then you'll really lose your mind and you'll try to build some kind of project to share with more than just a presentation. And that might be what leads you to burnout. Maybe it's something else. So that's the flow today, right? It's to go from the general, the broad, to the specific, and then try to recover once you're going down in flames, because we're human and it happens. So the other way to look at it is, if we look at the great wide world, we work to narrow the field until we work up to specialization and prestige classes, until we either try to become the GM or we pull the ripcord and become a farmer, like from 2000, Ridley Scott, I think it was, did, not Centurion, it's the other one, Gladiator. Right? I'm just a simple farmer who happens to be able to beat the snot and tar out of everybody else. Are you not into trains? Fine, let's figure out if you are into trains and let's go. So looking at events, because that's what we're talking about, socializing your career path, because going out and socializing yourself and your career means you're going to have opportunities that may not present themselves otherwise very easily. There are events that are local, there are national events, there are regional events and specialized events, right? And it's easy to throw this at you, but it'll come clear as we go through this that when you're going and looking for ways to branch out, if you're in the cybersecurity, computing, information security community, somewhere under that umbrella, you may find that there are things you want to learn or you're curious about. That's what a B-Sides is for. That's what a local meetup might be. There's a magazine called 2600, which is named after a certain, let's call it a frequency tone that can, in older days, trigger certain responses from a telephone system that was hardwired. You could use this whistle from the box of Captain Crunch to effectively tell the phone company you have paid for some long distance or some other codes with different tones. And since they were hardwired into the system, someone would have to physically catch you and drag you out of the payphone booth you were at to stop you from doing it. And there was no easy way to change the phone system. Well, the embodiment of that spirit became a magazine called 2600. There are local DEF CON groups. I don't know if you're familiar with DEF CON, but it is a large, let's say, gathering of creative people who like to explore security, privacy, and other areas that are usually related to computer activity and computer security. And so it's become so popular over the last 28 years. There are localized groups that you can go visit and spend time with. There's a DC 210 for, DEF CON 210, right? There's DC 726 for the expanded area code for San Antonio. And look up in other cities or go to defcongroups.org and you'll find about those folks. There's your local B-Sides, which B-Sides grew up out of, well, we'll get to that in a minute, but there are all these other local events and things you can, attend that will give you an opportunity to grow just here at home without having to travel anywhere. You can learn to pick locks if that's the kind of puzzle you're into. You can talk to people about how you've discovered something fascinating on the computer. But that's not the only way to do this. If you are in a position to do so, I highly encourage you to travel out of your own city to go see what other people are doing. Get outside of your local bubble if it's an option. Go to other cities for their B-Sides, or if you have an opportunity, communicate with other groups. We are in a banner time for being able to get out of your local bubble because there are events taking place all over this nation and neighboring ones every weekend. Every single weekend. If you are not completely burned out from looking at a screen and being on a camera or being on a chat platform, there is an opportunity for you, whether it's normally from a pay for event like SANS, or if you want to attend another larger event that happens to be free this year because nobody can physically get together. Normally, I would say, get in the car, get on your motor scooter, and ride. But right now, it's smarter and safer to get on your Zoom call, watch the Twitch streams, whatever platform it is, and get out there and learn. But sometimes it's not enough to go to a wider view event like a B-Sides. It covers a broad spectrum. If you look at something more specific like Recon or some of the ISC Squared Congress events or AppSec USA, these are events that are tuned to specific types of information being shared. DEF CON is a massive umbrella under which there is everything from how to do radio frequency scanning to how to mess with tamper evident tape. If you want to go to a local B-Sides, you may discover local talent, people who are learning to present or grow, or maybe you find a local group that does the thing you absolutely adore. And that's something that you have to think about engaging in. And if you're backed by your organization, that's amazing, because not everybody is. If you're doing this on your own, it's great to go to your local B-Sides or attend the online stuff. But if you get sent because your organization needs to send somebody, there are valuable things you can bring back doing that. and let's talk about that. Because these events aren't going to be just on Thursday and Friday. It's highly likely the pay for events are going to be all weekend long. Some of those events take place across the middle of the week to the weekend. If we go back for a second, some of the other events like your local groups, if they have weekend meetups, they're a couple of hours at a shot. When we're talking about going to these specific events, these may be multiple days, which means you've got to be able to afford hotel, you got to be able to afford food and travel, and maybe even cost of getting in. These are all very expensive prospects, and not everybody is backed. But if you are backed and you have the opportunity, make sure you're part of a team that can go, and don't be rude, but definitely be, let's say, a squeaky wheel to get that grease so you can attend one of these events and learn for yourself. But don't just go. Go because you want to get engaged. And I mean involved. And when I say involved, I'm referring to there are all these different events you can do once you're there. So depending on the event, sometimes there are villages or activities you can participate in. So if you have the time, don't spend all of your time in the talks. But when you're going, you should really consider what it is you want to do before you get there. I highly encourage taking a look at Sketch or whatever online resource or print material might be available to you, because there's just so darned much. It's overwhelming. Before you know it, your brain will be full, you'll have a headache, you'll kind of twitch a little bit. And if that isn't a pre-existing condition, I encourage you to make a plan, because you can go and get into capture the flag events if you are a hands-on person who just wants to see, I want a challenge. I don't want to sit in a talk. Okay, then don't. Go talk to the folks at the lockpick table. Go challenge the wireless village that might be participating in this event. Look ahead of time, make a plan. If you can, reach out ahead and contact the teams putting on those events to get even more information. Don't just rely on the website brief if you can help it, because that planning is going to be what carries you through. Because if you made it to the inn in the village, right? How does it normally start in these adventures? There's a barroom brawl. You're just trying to eat some pudding in the corner, maybe have a nice big mug of something to wash it down. And what happens? You get knocked in the back of the head by a barbarian who is having some kind of trouble with a dwarf. And the next thing you know, you're off with an unlikely band of musketeers on some darned adventure, and you don't know where you're going. But you have to figure out, because now you're beginning. And in that beginning, you have to embrace the kind of job you are in. You can't just ignore your job because you just want to look for the bit you're interested in. You have to keep that level set first so that there's enough room to expand your horizon. Because if you can't keep that level, then it's unlikely there's going to be a favorable view on expanding that, unless you can attach yourself through social media to do these things in your off time. That's right. This is homework. And it's not just homework, but expanding into social media is kind of a necessary thing to do to be aware of this. I have a friend who says, I don't do the socials. Well, then how are you going to find out about these events? I've got you for that. Yeah, hold on. I can't be, I'll be a boat anchor just as much as I am a help to you, because I'm going to want to do my own thing and you're going to want to do what you want to do. So it's really important to realize that you're going to have to decide that you have an interest. So you're going to have to do the research, in my opinion, just my opinion. But that doesn't mean that you have to go it alone. If you're jazzed to be on the show, there's going to be XP that you can extract from this level, which is going to be learning the lay of the land, figuring out who the players are in your local community and in the community of interest that you might have. So maybe today you said, I'm interested in that cyberspace because it should pay me. That's a valid thought. I've met people who have that way of thinking. But if you don't know the thing that actually interests you, it can be very challenging to figure out what aspects to focus on. That's why I call this drinking from the fire hose. So, you might want to just go to an event of some kind where it's an all-day event and force yourself, if they have multiple tracks, hey, track 1 is just technical things. Track 2, we're going to talk about policy. And track 3, we're making sheep dip. Who knows? The point is, sit in a track that you're not familiar with and look at the list of things for that day and maybe force yourself to sit through talks you wouldn't choose for yourself. I don't know anything about SQL injections. Well, one of my first volunteer experiences, I sat in a room all day because I came to volunteer. I showed up with nothing. I helped move some boxes. I sat down at the end of that and said, I don't know what to do with myself now. Where do you guys need help? I went and asked someone who was coordinating. And it turns out they had an opening on their audiovisual team, which I happen to have a background in. So for me, I said, oh, there's something, I believe there's a role I can fill. They had me talk to someone who asked me some questions regarding actually knowing something, and then they stationed me in their third track. I was exposed to so many different types of information that day. I was taking notes half the day when I wasn't helping make sure the recordings were on track. That's a fantastic way, by the way, to get involved. Volunteer at these events. See, that's one of the ways that it can help your career, because what happens here can be slowly form into a pattern that you can repeat. So if you go and get engaged and get involved and just figure your way around, like that first week in school, you don't know where the restrooms are, you kind of get turned around looking for the gym. Whatever the situation, you need to orient yourself, and there will be some confusion in that. But this brings value to each of these different parts of what we mentioned earlier, to yourself, to your team, your manager, your work, and your coworkers, right? Because you are going to learn this way. Now, I would like to believe that it works the same way for each person, but that's unrealistic. Your mileage may vary. There will be changes. There will be times that it doesn't work out for you, or you can't connect with people, or you have a family or health emergency. You just can't do it all. But if you do get to go with the intention of starting to learn. Keep an eye out. Be aware of what's going on around you, not just at the talks, but look at the way the community flows, the event flows. And this becomes important because you start to see who the people in your community are who are actively involved and helping to make things, the wheels turn, right? That becomes important because if your goal is to grow your career, getting involved outside helps you to learn these things more quickly. It gives you a leg up on someone who isn't doing this because they're not going to know about the ISC squared meetups or the ISACA meetups. They're not going to know about the local chapters for Alamo area user groups. These are all things you start to learn when you plug in. And by doing that, you're going to want to make sure you go with a buddy. But we'll get to that in a second. You provide this value back to your management because you start to demonstrate, as long as you're keeping that level set, you start to demonstrate that you're willing to grow beyond yourself. You're moving to actively learn. So you better make sure that you mentioned you went to an event and that if it supports an existing certification, terrific. You can use that for CPEs or continuing progress education credits, depending on whether you're a product management professional or you have a technical cert like a SEC Plus or CISSP. There are benefits to your management to see that you're growing and trying to step out. And when you get back from these events, start to look at the way that impacts. What did you learn from this event that you attended? How does that impact the people you work with? Can you maybe start to learn how some of their stuff works so that you can grow and ask and start to offer to help them? Because if you start, again, stepping further outside yourself, that's going to stand out to people because you're bringing something new to the table. Which brings up another thing. As a value to you, whenever you go to an event, consider writing a little trip report to yourself, a captain's log, whatever you want to call it. Take note of what you learned today, the people you came across, the music you heard in the presentation, something, anything, so that you can look back as you go from event to event and see if you're getting something out of it. If it turns out you're not, maybe this isn't the right event. If it turns out you're getting a lot out of it, maybe it helps you connect the dots. The point is, I can't remember what I had for lunch last week, but if I write down something because I was at an event, I just use my phone and I use the notes app on my phone, and I come back and go, oh, I learned about a book or a podcast. I learned about a technique I want to look up and read up on. I met someone I want to talk to them again after the event and look them up on social media because they're going to be connected to other people I want to learn from. I'd say raise your hand who's on Twitter, but social media is a mixed bag. The point is that one of the ways you can leverage social media is to go on your favorite platform and look for people that do the things you're interested in. Follow them and then follow the people they follow. It's a little exploratory, I admit, and you'll have to do some tuning, but you can start to pick up on threads that ripple all the way through the industry that you're interested in. And maybe you're saying to yourself that that's really neat. And it's funny that I could talk about this, but I don't know what you're going through. And that's right. I have no idea what you are doing. But the thing is, we all deal with imposter syndrome. We actually could see imposter syndrome kind of like a level boss. It's there waiting for us at every level of completion. It's the thing that holds us down, holds us back, and tells us we're not good enough. It's the nagging self-doubt. It's the person who picked on you in grade school and middle school. It's the abuse you received at the voice of another that just says you shouldn't try. You have to fight your way through it or beyond it. And everybody, I'm not you. You know what you have to fight. And if you can get past it, you can work on your second arc, specialization. You've gone to a few events now. You've done the thing. You've wandered around and sat through presentation after presentation, and maybe you find that there's something else that starts to stand out to you. You start to discover you really have an interest in butter sculpture. So you're going to only look for the active butter sculpture events that are taking place in your area. But when you go to these things, especially if it's your first couple of times out, I'm going to recommend you take a buddy. I'm suggesting you bring your butter buddy because it's important to keep in mind that this is going to be scary if you don't social very much. And it's very easy to get overwhelmed. So if you operate on having a buddy who's going to put up with this with you, maybe you buy them a pizza, help them with a sandwich, maybe they're good friends. Heck, maybe they're inviting you to go with them. Don't skip it. Don't skip it. This is an awesome opportunity. Go with your friend. You never know. You might help spark interest in them. And when you're doing this, you start to discover things about yourself. And pay attention to that. Your arc takes however long your arc takes. It may be a year. It could be 4 years. It's up to you to know where you are. I am in my 9th year of conference attendance as I'm giving this presentation to you. And these are some of the things I've learned along the way. It also helps that I'm a very effusive, affable human who likes to be polite to people. If you're maybe a little different than that, that's your business. But realize that's one of the ways that your mileage may vary. There will be situations where it doesn't matter how nice you are, you're not going to win. But in situations where you have the opportunity, bring your buddy and go explore different things. You're on a mission when you get to this stage, because now you know and you've made a plan and you've looked through the guide to the day or days to these events, and you're going to choose the things that interest you. So maybe you've decided butter sculpture wasn't quite the good fit. You're going to go look at that SQL injection and other database security minded things as you go. And because of that, it gives you breaks during the day to explore other things. Because the further you go away from home, the more opportunity you're going to get to see other people and other views. See, if there's only a narrow scope of people who do the thing you're interested in, there's only a limited number of presentations in the regional events that you might come across. Now the travel becomes even more important so that you can move outside of that box, outside the echo chamber. You've got to go further. And so some of these events at a larger scale, like your national ones, like a DEF CON, a Black Hat, you may get from a top 10 level of expertise that you can experience. And this, it isn't just the talk. Part of that getting away from the herd and getting off that wallflower reference, is going to be getting out of your shell further. At this level, the next version of getting out of your shell is going to be going to look for people after the fact. I don't know if anyone here is a pop culture movie watcher. I liked a movie from years ago called A Knight's Tale. At the end of the event, our hero, so to speak, our underdog hero says, that's it, I'm tapped out for the day. I just want to go eat dinner and relax. And his team says, you can't do that. You have to go beyond now. You have to go to the social event. What are you talking about? Nobody gives a rip if I show up. But guess what they do? Because if you go with a few additional questions and go gently walk up to the person who gave that presentation, maybe wait until they put the fork down. But the point is, you can run into them and have an informal conversation, which can open an even larger door. And you can't do that if you don't choose to go to the event, if you don't choose to go to the social hour afterwards, if you don't hang out at the watering hole that's attached to the event. I used to despise doing that. But I've learned the hard way that you miss out. And I just can't do that. It hurts, but that's how I'm wired. You don't have to be wired that way. It's just important. You know that Wayne Gretzky quote about you miss the shots you don't take? It's true. It's frustrating that it's true, but it's true. Because when you're on this mission, look at the idea of you can't force growth, right? You can put yourself in the path. You have to be willing to do it yourself, and it has to come kind of naturally. Yes, you can push yourself out of your own box, but you still have to talk to people. You still have to really work with it. And when I say work with it, I was, in my own way, I felt like I got discovered or accepted by the community of people I was spending time with somewhere around my third or fourth year. Up until that point, I'd go back to my room after the presentations. I'd call up for dinner, or I'd bring something back to the room, and I watch reruns on whatever was on the hotel room TV. Well, at a certain point, people started recognizing me for the volunteer work I was doing. And I mean, not like with signs and trophies. I mean, they started to know who I was. And by doing that, they said, hey, don't feel like you have to be alone. Please come sit with us. Man, I can't tell you what that did to me. That was, I'm being accepted. And it's actually happening in a way that I can write in my little journal. Tonight, I got invited to dinner with people I didn't know, who said they recognized me from other events that I help out at. It may take 2 or 3 years. Keep that in mind. It's not instantaneous. This is another reason I point back to bringing a buddy, because the first few events, it can be really hard. Okay, moving on. We have the idea of what you bring back with you. So the more events you start going to, it eats up more of your free time. But as you're writing your little trip report to yourself, you're keeping that log, you can bring back and say, hey, team lead, I learned about XYZ this week. And, I noticed our other project over here is talking about similar things. Could I volunteer to help out with that? That will stand out hugely to your management. You can bring value back, and they will see that you are growing as an individual contributor to your teams. That speaks volumes to them when it comes to review time. To your coworkers, they start to see that you are opening up your horizons, and if you are showing that you're willing to help or learn, maybe that means you're willing to help shoulder the load. That can be huge to them. But also it means that there's an opportunity that you could share about a topic or point them towards resources that you are becoming aware of. Because again, when you go out into the world like that, even if it's virtually, you're still bringing back an awareness you didn't have before if you keep your eyes and ears peeled. You looked at the brochure from that event you went to. They maybe haven't. If they aren't into that stuff, you could say, oh, I saw there was a virtualization security thing, a Kubernetes thing over here, or it turns out a butter sculpture thing, because turns out Ron's into butter sculpture. Who knew? The point is, you can point them towards the recordings, or at least to the people that, hey, guess what? I found out what their handle is on social media. I can point you to that person. You can begin to help them connect the dots, or you can connect the dots for yourself or for your team at a wider view. All of this is growing you. You are now building your own reputation. You are building your understanding. You are working on your own emotional intelligence and awareness, if you will, of the community around you to grow your career and help others. This is growing in your space, right? This also takes time. Again, it's terrific that I want to share this, but it doesn't always come easily, it doesn't always come quickly, and it doesn't necessarily guarantee success. I can only share the things that I've been able to do so far. And so far, and I'm telling you, I didn't know I was in InfoSec for the first 8 years I was in InfoSec. I was just doing a job with computers. It just turned out to be that cyber rose like a giant angry sunrise, and I was like, what happened? Oh, I'm already doing the thing? Great, what do I need to do to move forward? Which goes into mentoring. Which brings us to the next thing. Once we realize, it sounds terrific, you're going to tell me all this stuff from your little Zoom box on the other side of town here, buddy, because you don't know what I'm going through. I've got 65 reasons that I can't do any of these things, and it involves all these stories that I don't have time to tell you because I don't have a microphone, you do, so I'm listening to you, talking head. I get it. I don't know what you're going through, only you do. But we got to try to defeat and move past that level boss. You've got to work past that. Man, I don't know how to figure out how to volunteer for other events. I can barely get done the things I've got going on. I understand. If there's an opportunity or a way to do it, defeat that level boss and push past that imposter syndrome, because you can get to the prestige class. Now you get the fancy bits of armor and the special wand, or the unicorn tail if you prefer, maybe even cat-shaped headphones. It's all up to you what you choose to pursue. What you can do with it, however, is at this point in your story, it might be that people start coming to you asking you the questions, and maybe you're the go-to person with those answers. If that's the case, maybe you've reached a point where you've gathered enough, you've listened enough to others, that you can start to process all that and present it in a new way. You are giving back to your community. Now you are learning how to present. This opens an entire new vista of pursuit. You are looking at being the subject matter expert, the stuck-e, and you may now start looking for certifications, if you haven't already, that bolster your position. Because at this point in your career path, you are going to start looking into ways to help yourself learn to present. Presenting is a terrifying concept to a lot of people. I'm trying right now to make sure I engage with you, that I am not flat, that I am not boring, that I am not just a dead fish staring into the screen and just boring you to tears. I want you to be engaged. I want you to see the things that made me so excited that I got up and drove across town. And then I went again and I traveled across the country using my vacation time when we're not in the middle of a pandemic. Because it has helped me so much to grow, to do this. You start watching stand-up comedy specials with a new eye because you are looking for a way to engage the audience, a way to modulate your voice or invoke passion in others, or at least convey the passion that you yourself have. There's got to be a way to get better at whatever it is you're doing, because that's the only person you should be competing with, in my perspective, is yourself. If you are unable to get up in front of people today, find a group that'll help you get there tomorrow. The name of the group is called the Toastmasters. They are more prolific than anything I have ever seen. They are everywhere, and they're amazing. They make sure everybody gets a chance to speak. They force everybody to have a role, and they rotate the roles for each of the events that they put on for the regular meetings. It will force you to have to speak up and give you some of the tools you need in that toolbox. And again, the Toastmasters, they may be already in the organization, a small chapter, maybe in the organization you already have. If not, look up Toastmasters, Alamo area, or 210 Toastmasters. You will find in your favorite search engine a way to connect with this group. And I highly encourage it if you're at this stage or arc in your journey, because you're going to have to prepare not only material, but at some point, a live demo. If you can help it, number one, record yourself before the big day. Spend some time with that hairbrush in front of the mirror, set up a webcam, something. In our Zoom proliferated culture at this time, I'm pretty sure somebody's got a webcam you can beg, borrow, steal, or use. Heck, set your phone up against the wall and try to record with the selfie mode. And go through the motions of your presentation. Time yourself. Watch for the podium dance, because we all do it. You got to make sure that you yourself are not doing jazzercise while you're trying to talk. It can be a little distracting. And the last thing you want is to be distracting while people are supposed to be paying attention to what you're sharing. And it could detract from your message. So you have to work on that. So always, here are some great tips. I am a fan, since I help with audiovisual at multiple conferences. Please, if you're presenting, bring a backup on a thumb drive. Make sure you have a copy locally on your machine. Don't expect there to be Wi-Fi. Bring the adapters you need to use to connect to the projector, which means ask before you go and make sure you have those adapters with you. Also suggested but not required, a remote mouse of some kind to advance your slides, which will free you up if, say, the projector only has a 3-inch cord and your laptop is all the way over there and you want to be up in front of people. Aside from that, you've got to get to this. It is a massive step in your career path. And when your management learns that you can actually speak in front of people, that will change things. You may get asked in strange, unexpected moments where someone may reach out to you through social media and ask you if you might be willing to present to a college class. It's a possibility. I tell you the truth. The point is that if you get that opportunity, it can do amazing things for connective tissue in your career. If you are in the prestige class, now you have to find ways to communicate, learn to tell a story, beginning, middle, end. This becomes so important because that's what translating business situations into really is, in my opinion. If you've ever watched a Law and Order episode ever, they managed to squeeze the bad stuff happening and the comeuppance within 41 minutes and 3 commercial breaks. That's pretty tight to do and still help you make sure that you kind of understood what the bad person did and how they got their comeuppance at the end. So how can you do that in the time that you have? So that's something that will speak to your leadership and provide value to your management. Because, oh, by the way, special tip, if you're presenting with your manager, be good, but don't be better than your manager. Don't be better than your leadership. Do your best not to show them up. Make sure they get the kudos. It's an awkward moment. If you give them that awkward, you can believe it's coming back to revisit you. So just a word of caution. Keep it in mind, please. Now, beyond that, the ability to clearly communicate. I'm going to say it again. Please make sure you go and see the nice folks from Toastmasters. In addition, watch the recording of yourself. It's going to be awful. It's going to be just terrifying to see what you look like, how you're standing, what you do with your mouth. How many times do you say, Do you twitch? Accidentally scratch the back of your neck every 30 seconds? All of these things are the things you must learn about yourself and how you present, because learning to present represents a deep value to you because it builds the appearance of self-confidence. And, you know, when you go to a job interview, what is that except a story about yourself? If you learn to present and present well, it prepares you for the feelings of where to put all of your anxiety and how, and you know your mannerisms now, right? So that when someone asks you a question you're not so sure about, you can watch for that tell that shows that you're nervous. Like you don't know it, but right now I'm wiggling my toes. That's right. I get nervous standing up in front of people or sitting down as the case may be. And so I wiggle my toes inside my shoes. Those of you wearing open-toed shoes, this may not be the best for you. At least make sure there's a podium blocking the view so people don't watch you trying to do the flight of the bumblebee on the floor in front of them. I do find, though, that I have to thank Mr. Castine from 7th grade English because I've been using that trick ever since. So, presenting at conferences also puts you in a different group of people now than when you've been attending events before. See, before you were an attendee, you were someone who came up at the end with questions. Now you're the person they're coming to ask questions to. It means you're on the other side of that podium. It puts you on a level with all of the other presenters, which means you're going to be in the green room or the ready room or the speaker presentation room, which means you're talking to all of the other people who are in this stage. Take the opportunity to learn from them because it's an audience you may not have had access to directly before. Because now, if you build that connective, that communication with these folks, I found that I have a sounding board through someone I met, that we were both presenting at a conference. We hit it off, just chatting. And now back and forth, we'll talk about a new presentation we're working on over the course of a year maybe, that we're tinkering on and trying to polish. And it just gives you one more outlet to help you get through this. So if you have an idea, you can polish it, get it ready, try it out locally first at your local meetup in a shorter version or at a local B-sides. And then from the regional event, start submitting these talks to the larger events that you went to earlier on. Go and look for that event that was specifically into butter sculpture. And now you've been chasing all over to talk to the regional chainsaw butter sculpture masters. And now maybe you've gotten your way up and you're only using egg beaters to shape your butter sculpture. The point is, whatever skill level you're at, practice it locally and then apply larger. I don't care that you're nervous that they're never going to take it. They're never going to listen to me. Forget that. This is like a movie audition or for a local play. If you don't apply, you can't get turned down. Hey, terrific, you avoided it, but you didn't grow. If you want to grow, it's worthwhile to apply all the time. And there are calendars online. What's an upcoming event in North America? Look for computer security. And you may have to search a few times, by the way. There are a huge number of events, but here I am saying, you know, it's terrific. You know, you really think you know what I'm going through? No, I don't. But I don't know you, but you know yourself. And that's one of the challenges this is really about, is facing that struggle that you have and having to overcome the level boss and defeat the I'm afraid to speak in front of people monster, or the I stutter monster, or any number of other things that stand in the way. Because if you can do that, maybe you move on to being your very own dungeon bastard, pardon my language. You can work to being the game master. You can start a new show, whether that show is a local meetup because there isn't a DEF CON group in your area, or maybe you decided, you know what, I actually want to start a butter sculpture group because I think it would be valuable. Whatever the thing is, go ahead and pursue that, because that is a road to leadership. And that brings a whole new level of interest. It gives you some way to connect to your community and see an entire new audience that you haven't seen before. See, now what you truly want to be exhausted is when you're trying to help wrangle other people's cats into the room. But you can learn to do things differently than you ever imagined. And management of an event is not the same as business management. I want to make sure that's clear and distinct, because operating a local B-Sides is nothing like trying to wrangle an agile work stream. That's a different story. But it may lend itself towards that, and maybe that's in your toolbox. Maybe that's a skill set. Maybe you are hyper-organized, and if you are, then maybe that's in your future. I learned a few things about myself when my leadership said, you do this? Terrific, come here, we've got a job for you. Well, it turns out it wasn't my ideal fit. However, when you're trying to keep all those balls from dropping, you can start to build more networking skills here when you are doing the I'm coordinating a thing, because now you're going to connect with more people. You're going to try to make sure you find people who have the skills you're looking for. But at the same time, there are willing partners who are going to come along and ask you questions you never expected. I've, for my part, never knew how expensive table coverings were, or how many tables you had to rent, or what it's like to have to worry about insurance for an event. You know what? What is it like to feed 300 people or expect 85 and get 200? These are things you will learn when you put yourself out there to grow these things. And if you've done it already, you're in a higher advantage than many. It's a learning experience I would not skip, because this is all part of understanding who you are and your arc, your story, your growth. Because when you're doing this, you learn a whole new range of skills, from marketing and budgeting to even coordinating, whether it's how to set up a Zoom meeting, or maybe take notes in a new tool, or look for ways to answer questions to problems you didn't know you had before. That is massive, and it provides so much value and makes you more flexible, and it fits on a resume extremely nicely. However, it may not take the shape of I repaired an entire enterprise. No, but it says I connected with my local community and helped find jobs. 2 job offers were made during my event last year. That says something to somebody, because you're working towards building your community. We made sure we connected in our community table area. We have 12 different groups who are present, who are able to help with Project Safe Escape and get people who are in danger out of danger, to connect people with law enforcement if that was their interest, to actually getting resume review handled. These are things that you can't foresee until you've started getting into that space. And they all add value to your management, your team, to the people around you, to your wider community, because you're plugging in to give back. Because they helped you get where you are, you're now trying to help either the people directly or indirectly, because you realize there's value in it in helping others. And it's terrific that I sit on this side of the screen talking about all this stuff, but I'm not in your shoes. I don't go through what you go through, and I've got my own battles to fight. So once you've done all this, and you find somehow you've reached past the 4th arc, and you are exhausted, and you realize that even hearing the words organize sends you into a tailspin emotionally, you might find out that you actually have this thing called burnout. And burnout is not an easy thing. It's basically you're stuck. You are so out of your depth or you are so stressed out that you cannot even function. There's the phrase, I can't even. Burnout, I believe, is what it is applied to. So when things get that far down and out, you have to find a way to Control-Alt-Delete and hit the reset. You've got to find a way to look back. Now, this is a very short reference card. This is like a recipe card. There is so much more information here that could be said about burnout, but once it lands on your shoulders and it's holding you down in bed like an overweighted blanket, and you don't even want to get up and shave, whatever shaving you do, that's your business. What I'm getting at is there has to be a point where you look back to the very start. Look to your Art of Noise or your Yes 90125, that early thing that either irritated you or caused you to be curious, and go back and revisit it. This is one of the keys to unlocking the start of a path back from burnout. At least it has been for me, because I burned out about 3 years ago, and I mean hard. I'm talking about I wasn't caring if I got up for work. It impacted my performance at work. It made one of the B-Size conference late. In other words, getting the preparations done were late because I just overextended. I did 11, 12 conferences that year, volunteered at a few others. So I attended 11 and then helped at 3, right? I overdid it in a massive way. And when you do that, you start to hurt the people around you, whether you know it or not, because they're trying to lighten the load for you or give you an out. But that means they're not getting something else done on their own. So you have to find ways to re-engage. The beast of burnout is real and it's harsh, but that's where building your network of people now comes into play more importantly than it ever has before. This is the opportunity to seek out and get help and say, I'm drowning. And if you have a good team that you've built around you, or a good network of people, or an extended chosen family through your meetup group or whatever, this is where we're hoping that that person or a group of people can spot it and reach out to you. Because sometimes the hardest thing to do when you're drowning is ask for help because no one can hear you. So you also can be surprised sometimes at the support that may be found. But then again, maybe you wind up out on a door of someone saying, I'll never let go. And suddenly, you know, you're at the end of a James Cameron movie and everybody's like, there was room on that door. There was room. So let's hope that you never get in that position. And if there are groups that you should reach out to. And if you know someone, reach out on their behalf because you can't do it all yourself. It's just not possible. I am living proof that no matter how far you stretch, there is a breaking point. You think you can do that extra event, and just one more thing. Hey, would you have time this weekend to? I'm afraid I don't. The plate's full. I would love to help you later. Please, can we revisit this at another time? Or no, and hang up the call, which may not really be the greatest for the relationships you have, but that's your business. So we need each other, and we have to know that we are heard, we are listened to, that we are cared for. You have to set bounds, right? Set those boundaries so that you can protect yourself to an extent. Do the things you can do, but try not to push too far. Know your limits if you can. If you can't, I hope you discover them painlessly because there's so much to do. Now, I'm telling you all of this, not just because it sounds neat and I looked it up on the internet or watched other presentations. I did all of those things. I also happen to live it right now. This is a chunk from my story because I was the kid hiding out in the AV room with the slide projectors and the 16mm film projectors back in the early 80s, right? I would take my lunch and instead of sitting with kids or trying to figure out where I wasn't going to be allowed to sit, I would just take my lunch and go hide with Miss Jean Mirish and go sit in that AV room and wait for someone to call for a slide projector because I wouldn't have to deal with people or worry about their expectations or anything. And if I can do that, if I can get to a point where I am sharing with all of you and I help coordinate a B-Sides with an amazing team of people who really do care, oh, I can tell you it's possible. You can make this happen. You can work through it. You can have an art degree and then come back and get a master's degree, or maybe you get a second degree. Whatever the case, get a certification if that's what's appropriate for your situation. Have a mentor, talk to someone. realize there's an opportunity to invest back and forth in one another. And if you are fortunate enough to find someone who's willing to invest in you, invest in their advice to show that you value what they're telling you. But that's a separate conversation. It's neat that I want to share this with you. I know I've got my own level boss to fight because I believe that we are building a community together. And I think that we should do that together so that we can make it better. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your time.